Hello listeners, Jordan here. I just want to let you know that you can listen to Nighttime early and ad-free on Amazon Music. Include it with Prime.
You are listening to the Nighttime Podcast.
Hello listeners, and welcome to Nighttime. In this episode, our story is going to take us back to 2022 and into suburban Ontario for what can only be described as a living nightmare. Something awful had been happening to 37-year-old Iranian immigrant Elnaz Hajtamiri. And although she never confided in her loved ones what exactly was going on, in hindsight, it's quite clear she was being hunted. Over the span of several weeks, multiple tracking devices were found on her car. She was violently attacked by a group of masked men. And then, in her last known moments, 3 men dressed as police officers entered a home she had been staying in, claiming to have a warrant for her arrest. Elnaz was last seen moments later, being dragged barefoot through the snow by these men and into a white SUV. Now, despite incredible efforts from Elnaz's many loved ones and an all-hands-on-deck approach by the Ontario police, the questions of where she is, who took her, and why all remain unanswered. But it seems those secrets aren't going to be kept for much longer. So buckle up for this one. Tonight, in this episode of Nighttime, Madeleine Klein and I are going to discuss the abduction and presumed murder of Elnaz Hajtamiri.
It was just after 8:30 p.m. on January 12th that Hajtamiri was taken by 3 men from a home in Wasaga Beach. Officers with OPP say the men had been wearing police-issued gear. They fled in a white Lexus RX SUV.
Police were called to this apartment in Richmond Hill in December. They say Hajtamiri was assaulted, struck with a frying pan in an underground parking garage. And now York Regional Police believe that this incident is connected to her abduction.
That a person is disappeared and we don't know anything. Is she alive? Is she in the country? Is she out of the country?
For the family, they say they're focused on one thing.
My focus is on bringing Elnaz home.
And have a very pointed message to the people who abducted her.
I'm speaking to the people who are holding her. Please bring her home. No questions asked.
Ms. Madeleine Klein, I always feel lucky to have you as a guest on the show, but especially so tonight, because I feel we are burning the candles on both ends here.
This very well might be our last stream. I don't know. We can tentatively plan for next week.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, we won't count our chickens before they hatch, but.
And for people who think, or for people who don't know what's going on, Madeleine is very, very, very pregnant. And at any minute, we may have to hit stop here. In fact, I'll let the audience in on some behind-the-scenes stuff. I messaged you earlier today. I sent you a text. And typically, if I text you or send you a message, within like 3 or 4 minutes, you see it. Because you probably don't have a lot much else to do at this point other than look at your phone, given
it's usually glued to my hand, pregnant or not.
Yeah. But about 5 minutes passed without it being seen or read. And I was like, oh, it's off tonight. She's having a baby right now. That's what I thought. And I wasn't joking.
I was just napping.
It was just a nap. False alarm.
Yeah.
In fact, it's on the horizon so closely that we shouldn't even be wasting any time here. We got to get into it.
Yeah, it could happen tonight.
Mm-hmm. That could get interesting. This episode, we're going to be covering the abduction and presumed murder of Elnaz Hajtamiri. And this is a story that it's going to be unique for me to tell because we did cover this show or this story on Nighttime Podcasts in the past, but I did it in a different way. I covered Elnaz's story shortly after her abduction, and then I did a series of episodes providing updates as the story developed. But we're at a point in the story now where we can kind of like zoom out and look at it from start to finish. And I gotta say, I know her story, but even today and yesterday, going through it and reorganizing things for our discussion tonight, this story has got to be one of the worst I have ever heard in the history of this show.
Well, it's terrifying. It's terrifying the way things played out. And it's literally every was going to say every woman's nightmare, but it's really just like everyone's nightmare.
It's the story. At least it appears to be the story of a woman who was stalked, attacked, got away with her life once, and then stalked and attacked again, and seemingly didn't get as lucky the second time. And it seems like there are a lot of people involved in it. It's dark, and I don't know. It's just horrifying that this can happen.
There's just a lot of questions. Like, I realize that as the public, we are not entitled to know everything that goes on in an investigation as it happens. But like, we're almost 2 years from her being abducted, and there's more open questions than any answers.
And abduction is not a word that you throw around lightly, but in this case, it certainly was an abduction. This was a knock on the door and a fake cop saying, we got a warrant for your arrest. When that didn't work, they all but grabbed her and dragged her into a car, took her away, never to be seen again. And that is from a movie. That's hell on earth.
Yes. When you think abduction, you think of being either taken directly from your house or like a baby being taken from their crib in their bedroom. And this is like exactly.
This is that
textbook. Yeah.
Well, let's get into it. I kind of divided our conversation up in a few ways, but I think first we should probably just talk a little bit about Elnaz Hajtamiri and about her background, what brings her to Canada. There's not a lot known about her life before Canada because she's originally from Iran. At the time of her disappearance, she was 37 years old. And it seemed like I say, there's not a lot known about her life in Iran, but what we do know is that it seemed to be, for the most part, a good life. She's from a large family that clearly loves her because they've been leading the search for her and the search for justice for whoever was responsible for whatever happened to Elnaz. But it seems like something changed that really pulled the rug out from underneath her, and that was the death of a husband. Do you want to tell me a bit about her husband and kind of what set off the situation that leads her to Canada?
Well, when she was 25, she lost her husband to like a sudden illness. So that was in 2017. And I could not imagine losing your spouse of 60 years would be hard. I couldn't imagine losing them so young. Yeah,
seriously. He was a veterinarian. His name was Farnham Sheporafar. Veterinarian. So you can only, I don't know what a veterinarian makes in Iran, but I'm assuming a veterinarian at 25 is making enough that they would have been able to have a good life together. But when he passes away suddenly after a sickness, so I don't know what the sickness was, but whatever it was, it happened fast. That left her in a situation where whatever life was laid out in front of her that she envisioned with him, that was no longer an option. But she still did some good. When he passed away, there was a lot of money left behind, and she used that money to build a school in Iran that was specifically for young girls in an impoverished village, and she built it in honor of her late husband. As a young person doing that, I think that is really nice. If I was, got a large inheritance, if I got a large inheritance at 27 years old or something, I don't know if I would think I'm going to honor the person who like that. I think that just says a lot about her.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you know what? I don't even think it was an inheritance. It was their savings. So he clearly, they both probably did fairly well. And she's just got clearly a huge heart, and what a great idea.
Yeah. After his death, about a year later, she came to the decision to come to Canada with the plan to rebuild her life. In 2018, she immigrated to Canada from Iran. She chose Canada in part because she had some childhood friends here, as well as family that lived some in Canada, some in the United States. And when she came to Canada, she settled in the Richmond Hill area of Ontario, so outside of Toronto. And we'll come back to this, but as fate would have it, she found work in the importing, exporting, shipping industry. And I think maybe that's a part of what sets the scene for the story we're going to get into,
I guess. Well, and so she lost her husband in 2017, and she moved here in 2018. So she had a busy year. She lost her husband, opened up an all-girls school, and then came to Canada.
Yeah, that takes guts, right?
Right?
And when I hear stories of immigrants to Canada, that's always my thought. It's like, man, they're like brave. If you told me like, Jordan, you're going to Iran for a week on vacation, I would need to mentally prepare for like months to build up to that.
Exactly. But it's not a vacation. You're uprooting your entire life.
Yeah. And then in doing that in the wake of trauma of losing your husband, that's something to a country with a different culture. I don't know if it'd be a different
like you're a ways away. Oh, there'd be a language barrier.
Yeah, you would think.
Like I'm sure she learned English over there, but there'd still be a huge learning curve.
Yeah. So she was working in Canada in the importing, exporting, shipping industry, and had plans to start a cake baking business, which is I don't know why that's important, but that makes its way into so many articles. Somebody once upon a time close to her must have said that, but it gets mentioned so often. I feel the need to say Elnaz likely would have been an amazing cake baker.
So on top of everything else, she's a good baker too.
What doesn't she have? And when you see any photos of her, there's a lot of photos you see shared around from the various articles about her case. She just looks like a sweet little nice lady. Like she's very good looking and just looks like a good person.
And we'll get into the chain of events that goes on, but like you'd never peg her to be in the middle of this.
Yeah, of some of the darkest organized crime and criminal element. She does not have the appearance that you would think like, oh, I could see her being involved in international vehicle theft and all these other.
Well, and also even if she, accidentally like got into this group, it's even if she wasn't involved directly in the crime, you look at her and you hear about her and you're like, she's too smart to get into any of that.
Yeah. But it doesn't seem to be the way for a lot of people. And it seems in Elnaz's case, what brings her into the dark circle we're going to hear about is while in Canada, she meets and forms a relationship with a man named Mohammed Lilo. According to people close to her that have spoke to the media, is that didn't seem like a very serious relationship. It wasn't something she discussed often. To some people, she hadn't even mentioned Mohammed Lilo, but it was someone she was involved with for a period of time in a boyfriend and girlfriend type relationship, but they were also in business together in some capacity. But at the time of her disappearance, she had been about 3 months outside of the relationship with Mohammed, but we're going to come back to him. Let's start with a short talk about, I should set this up better, but Elnaz's story, there's really two main events that take place. One happens in January and one happens a month prior, but I'm going to jump ahead in the timeline with the January event because this is really what brought Elnaz's story to the news, and this is her actual abduction. Elnaz was abducted on January 12th of 2022 from a home in Wasaga Beach. Wasaga Beach, if you're unfamiliar, is a town in Simcoe County, Ontario. It's about 150 kilometers north of Ontario, and most people who know of Wasaga Beach would know it as like a touristy summer spot. I didn't know this until I was doing research for this episode, but it's situated along the longest freshwater beach in the world. I never would have thought the longest freshwater beach in the world would be in Ontario.
Weird. A little embarrassing on my part. The only reason I know that Wasaga Beach, Ontario exists is because I used to watch Degrassi and one of the characters is from Wasaga Beach.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it's like, oh, I know where that is.
I'm going to play a news report that is how the story originally breaks to the public. This is reporting on an abduction from Wasaga Beach, Elnaz's abduction. And at the time they refer to it as her home. It turns out that's not the case, but there are some errors in the earlier reports. But here's how the abduction of a young woman from a home in Wasaga Beach first makes the airwaves.
Police say Elnaz Hajtamiri was forced from her Wasaga Beach home on Trailwood Place last night just after 8:30. The 37-year-old woman was abducted by 3 men.
We have an army of officers that are engaged right now, and it's a very active investigation, and all our resources are out.
Police are now looking for 3 black men seen fleeing with the woman in a white SUV. Neighbors painting a picture of evening chaos that normally doesn't find their quiet community.
The whole street was full of cops. It was about 8 o'clock last night, and I just couldn't believe what happened.
Police say the three suspects are considered armed and dangerous.
We cannot speculate as to why this occurred. Our goal is to bring Elnaz home safely.
Police investigators were back in the neighborhood today, speaking with anyone who may have seen anything. They're also checking to see if any homeowners caught anything on camera. Police will not say how the men got into the home or what, if any, weapons they had.
So that's the original early news report. Not a lot of information's given, but I think it does paint a picture of something unusual about this abduction. They're talking to neighborhood people like there's cops everywhere. You could the police officer in that clip also says like we had all hands on deck. I don't know how they would normally handle an abduction, but that just even in that article or that news clip, I can tell this is a big deal, whatever's happening.
Well, and it wasn't like a secretive, stealthy abduction.
Mm-hmm.
It was like a quite clear dragging her out of the home abduction.
Yeah, and the police knew that at this point, but the media didn't. The media is just like, there is an abduction, 3 guys, a white car, and the neighbors are describing this scene of chaos. It isn't until I think about 2 days later that more information is given about the actual abduction and how it went down. And I'll play that as well, because this is really when the story starts to form of, how awful this was. I should also say as well, this clip is in response to a press conference that the police did just days after her disappearance.
In the week since Elnaz Hajtamiri was abducted, police have heard nothing from her kidnappers. No demand for ransom, no proof the 37-year-old is alive.
We want to find her. We have grave fears for her safety.
Last Wednesday, police say 3 men posing as police officers showed up at Hajtamiri's home in Wasaga Beach, about 90 minutes north of Toronto.
3 males, described as black males, wearing police-issue gear, had attended the residence, identified themselves as police, and advised the homeowners that they had a warrant for the victim's arrest.
The man who answered the door was suspicious and called 911. There was a struggle. Hajtamiri was grabbed, forced into a white Lexus SUV that sped away.
Shocked. I mean, this is a quiet neighborhood.
Police say Hajtamiri is not married and lived at the home with family.
We haven't found any evidence that Elnaz was involved in any form of criminal activity whatsoever.
Still, experts believe this was not a random act and say police would be investigating her past as well as her family's and her friends.
You don't just pick somebody out of the blue for this. There's got to be some motivation behind it, whether it's a business deal that may have gone wrong, whether it's criminality and some debts that are owing. We don't know.
Police won't say whether they believe Hajtamiri is still alive. They have set up a dedicated tip line and are hoping to hear something from her abductors soon.
That police in that clip, the police officer says this doesn't seem like something that would be random. I think it clearly isn't. To show like it's targeted, to show up in fake police costumes with this whole gimmick of we got a warrant for Elnaz. They're there for her.
Weird how either police or media, I'm not sure who is speaking there, they automatically jump to this wasn't random. We're going to look into criminal background and whatever. But statistically, it's usually the spouse or boyfriend. Mm-hmm. So why wasn't that mentioned?
Well, they did say she's not married or something. I guess they did mention it, but it's I just think the idea of it being that intense, to show up with a fake warrant pretending to be cops. If you hear of an ex-boyfriend, doing something awful, or a boyfriend or husband doing something awful to their spouse, it's usually more direct and not this kind of thing. This, to me, if I'm without knowing anything about this case, I'm thinking crime, organized crime or something. It seems too organized.
No, you have a point there.
But
yeah,
I'll tell you, I'll fill in a few blanks that article missed about the actual abduction. Is they're still describing it as the home Elnaz lived in with family. Again, she doesn't, and she was visiting there or staying there temporarily, and we'll talk about that a bit more in a second. But what actually happened is it was a Wednesday night at about 8:30 p.m. She's staying at a home with family. There's a knock on the door. And when they answer the door, it's three men dressed as and presenting themselves as police officers. They explain to the man who opened the door that they're there to get Elnaz Hajtamiri. They have a warrant for her arrest. Elnaz comes to the door to be like, what is going on? What is this about? When they're explaining, my understanding is aggressively, she has to come with them. They have a warrant. She's under arrest. Either Elnaz or the family member who answered the door realized that all three of the men, although they have police uniforms on, they all have sneakers. And that is what sets them off to be like, wait a sec, who are you guys? And someone asks the police officers, can you prove you're a cop? Do you have a badge or something? As soon as resistance is shown and any question to their credibility, one of them charge into the house, grab Elnaz by the hair and drag her out of the home barefoot. She's kicking and screaming. They drag her and force her into a white SUV that was parked outside.
But remember, on their way to the car, they take her watch off and ditch her phone too.
Yes, that's another thing. Yes, as they're pulling her to the car, they take her watch and phone off and chuck it in the snow.
I don't think that's police protocol.
No, then they put her in the car. The car sits there for a minute or two, which is really weird, and then drives off. Speeds off.
I would love to know what was said in that 120 seconds.
Nothing good, I'm sure.
No.
And the idea of there's a few things with an abduction. They say if the people who are abducting you are willing to show you their face, that's a bad sign, because that means
yes,
they're taking you for good. She would have saw their face, I believe. I don't believe they had their faces. No, they did have their faces covered. They had a kind of balaclava.
Just a medical mask? Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was medical masks.
No,
or something.
Eventually the police release sketches of them. And the sketches are people in balaclavas where you just see their eyes. But if she couldn't see their face, so, with an abduction, if they let you see their face, that's a bad sign. If they cover their face, that's a good sign. Because they're worried that you may live to tell about it. But I think them grabbing your phone and watch and chucking it would be a bad sign.
Yes, that's police can get fairly rough, and we all know that. But yeah, they don't usually throw away your electronic belongings before throwing you in their unmarked car.
No, certainly not, and definitely not. I think. No question, they're not cops. And that was that was learned as they were dragging her into the snow. I'm sure that's when it was learned, these aren't cops at all. But as nuts and as bad as the story already is, the plot is going to thicken in the most insane way as this gets going. You mentioned, they in the news clip, they speculated was she involved in crime, but they didn't really talk about her boyfriend and, her ex-boyfriend, if he could be involved. Her ex-boyfriend, I've mentioned him already, Mohammed Lilo, his name gets inserted into this story just shortly after her abduction when he's arrested related to criminal harassment against Elnaz in the weeks prior to her disappearance. But when the news comes out about his arrest, we start to learn more about the days, weeks, and month before Elnaz had to relocate to Wasaga Beach. And it's going to paint an altogether different picture. So I'll play the news clip informing the public of Mohammed Lilo's arrest. And then we'll catch up.
Elnaz did everything that she should have done, everything that she could have done to protect herself.
Former Crown Prosecutor Devin Bain says police and the justice system as a whole failed to protect Elnaz Hajtamiri.
Elnaz was abducted in a way that was so easy for her abductors to accomplish.
The 37-year-old woman was in hiding at a family home in Wasaga Beach after York Regional Police say she was hit in the head with a frying pan in an underground parking garage just before Christmas.
Elnaz was abducted in circumstances where her imminent danger and the imminent danger of escalation of harm to her was obvious and would have been obvious to any conscientious investigator.
Baines and the family he's been hired to represent questioning how seriously officers took Hajtamiri's safety following the alleged attack by two men police consider suspects. This photo showing the extent of Hajtamiri's injuries, about 40 stitches to close a wound on her forehead. Hajtamiri's vehicle was found to have at least 2 tracking devices on it prior to the attack. And according to her family, police found another device on her Lexus after she was hurt. According to family, Baines says Hajtamiri called police a month earlier in November when her former boyfriend, Mohammed Lilo, showed up at her Richmond Hill home about a month after she ended the relationship. Lilo, who lives in Montreal, was arrested and charged with criminal harassment 9 days after the alleged abduction. Baines confirms Hajtamiri was the victim of the criminal harassment complaint. Lilo has been out on bail ever since.
So there's a lot to say after that, because when he's arrested and that news comes out, it just blows the lid off this, because as I mentioned in the setup to this episode, there's really 2 incidents related to Elnaz that we're going to be discussing. We have the January abduction from the home in Wasaga Beach, but as we heard in that article, she was staying at Wasaga Beach because she was in hiding, because she was attacked with a frying pan a month earlier, or just a couple weeks earlier, back in the underground parking lot of her home in Richmond Hill. So we have that incident that we're going to get into. That was that occurred on December 21st. So I guess about 3 weeks before her abduction. But in that clip describing that attack, it also mentions the fact that she had to call the police even before that because her ex-boyfriend showed up at her house uninvited. So where do you want to go with this?
Does he not live in Montreal?
Yeah, that's a good drive, right?
How did he just kind of show up? And is criminal harassment just fancy talk for stalking?
I think, yeah, stalking to the point
I would imagine
that it's criminal. So she would have had to made it clear that she didn't want to communicate with him anymore. Yeah. So, but I think if it's at the point where an ex-boyfriend goes from Montreal to Richmond Hill to see you uninvited, that's pretty creepy. If shortly after that, masked men are beating you with a frying pan to the point that you get 40 stitches in your underground parking lot.
Like, what a weapon choice.
Yeah, that is, I will never understand that. I'll tell you a bit of the story because that clip just kind of glosses over it. But again, for people keeping score, we're talking about 3 weeks before she's in Wasaga Beach. She's still living in Richmond Hill, Ontario at this point on December 21st, a couple days before Christmas. Elnaz was leaving her home. She lived in an apartment building that had underground parking. She gets out of the elevator and she goes into where all the vehicles are. She's there with a friend. As her friend gets in the passenger side of the car, and as Elnaz is walking over around the car to get in the driver's side, 2 men jump out of a vehicle nearby and just charge at her. They grab her and drag her out of the car as she's getting into the driver's seat. They're both wearing masks, like balaclavas, I believe, like covering their faces. And one of them has a frying pan that he's just clubbing her over the head with, and viciously, like to the point that these men become wanted for attempted murder. There's photos that came out in the press of her with her forehead just stitched right across because she was, split right open.
40 stitches, that's not minor.
No, when you I don't know if you've seen the photos of her after. There's photos that were taken of her in the hospital after getting the stitches, and it looks like if you got hit in the head with an axe, it would be the same appearance. That's how bad it looks.
Oh my God.
But these men were attacking her and also trying to pull her away. It seems like what had happened is these men didn't realize that someone was in the passenger side of the car, because they're clubbing Elnaz, trying to pull her away from the car. As the passenger gets out of the passenger side of the car to, I don't know if to help or what, they both stop beating her for a second and look towards the person getting out of the passenger side to maybe assess the situation. And just by luck, as this kind of stare down is happening, someone gets out of the elevator to go towards their car, someone unrelated, and they start screaming, and Elnaz is screaming, the passenger is screaming, and the guys with the frying pan decide to get out of there. They jump in their car and just, take off. Of course, an ambulance is called to look after Elnaz, who is in horrible shape. And here's just, sorry to go on, but there's just so much to this. But when the ambulance shows up, she's disoriented from how badly she was beaten, but she was convinced that the ambulance wasn't real and it was an abduction. She didn't want to get into the ambulance, and they had to like coax her into it. Like, you need to go, like, everything is okay. This is a real ambulance.
See, and like in hindsight, that tells us she was already weary of people who should be in positions of authority or trust.
Yeah, I think she knew the score. She knew what was going on.
She knew something was happening. I don't know if whoever orchestrated this threatened her with how it was going to happen or what, but she knew something wasn't right.
Which is to look over your shoulder is one thing, but to have this good of a reason to, man, like I'm just thinking when she was in Wasaga Beach, she must have been horrified. One other aspect to this too that we should get into is in the investigation into the frying pan attack, police officers inspected her car and they found not one, not two, but I believe 3 tracking devices, like GPS devices under her car, like it connected to it. Like she's obviously was being tracked, and they weren't surprised to find them because it turned out that she had some work done on her vehicle like a couple months earlier, and one was found during that like routine kind of maintenance as well. So when I said just as we started that this seems to be the story of a woman who was just stalked, attacked, and taken. Now that part of that stalking was as far as like a bunch of tracking devices on her car.
Like terrifying and just bizarre.
Bizarre, and I'm sure the police agreed, and that's probably a part of the reason they said, you know, whatever's going on with you is really serious. You need to leave Richmond. Do you have any family outside of the city, like anywhere you can go to stay? And that was when she decided to go to Wasaga Beach. I have, you know, family there. It's outside of the city. I can just stay at their house and be safe while, you know, you do your investigation. And that was what eventually brought her to Wasaga Beach, where about 3 weeks later, after, you know, just as she's recovering from this beating with the frying pan, police knock on her door and drag her out to the car.
Like, that's not long at all. She would have still had like bandages.
Hell yeah. It's in such close proximity of time that it's like it's one event. Clearly the attack on her and the abduction are the same people using similar methods.
Oh, absolutely. And like, just so Wasaga Beach is like what, an hour and a half ish outside of the city.
Yeah.
Clearly it, like, the lengths these people are going to get to her is crazy. Between the tracking devices and just approaching her and attacking her. And it sounds like they tried to abduct her from the parking garage and failed.
Certainly, because the original investigation into the people involved in the parking lot attack, they were wanted for attempted murder and attempted kidnapping.
Okay.
But you hear that her ex-boyfriend's charged with criminal harassment. Of course we would look at him. You'd be a fool not to, but there's multiple other people involved. There's, you know, 2 people at least involved in the underground parking attack in December. There's at least 3 people involved in the abduction by Wasaga Beach. So it's, you think of when you hear a story of a husband or boyfriend doing something to their spouse, I think it's a bit more unusual. Like, that's a common story, but it's probably a bit more unusual that they call in favors from a bunch of buddies to, you know, get involved in that. And that's like,
that's true.
If that's what this is, that's what seems to have been happening. But
well, when I first heard about all of this, my first question was, does this ex have money and the means to hire these people?
Well, we're going to learn about Muhammad Lilo and his access to money and power and such as we go. The next development in this case we'll get to is going to shed some light on it. About 3 months after her abduction, the only information we really had at that point is everything we've heard so far in these news clips, but there was a couple photos that were taken by security camera showing the people fleeing the scene of the underground parking lot attack. And you could get a decent look at the faces of the individuals responsible. So those photos were shared around with, of course, the request of, if you recognize these people, let us know. About 3 months after her abduction, one of the men responsible for the underground parking lot attack with a frying pan was arrested. And we learned a little bit more about his background, and I think it gets us into the ballpark of who's involved in this. I'll play that clip of describing his arrest, and then we'll catch up.
92 days after Elnaz Hajtamiri was allegedly abducted from a Wasaga Beach home by 3 men posing as police officers, an arrest has been made. This man, Riyasat Singh, in police custody tonight. The 23-year-old from Mississauga is charged with attempted murder and attempted kidnapping related to an alleged attack on Hajtamiri in a Richmond Hill parking garage December 20th. Hajtamiri, according to York Regional Police, was taken to hospital bleeding from her forehead, struck in the head with a frying pan. York Regional Police also issuing a Canada-wide warrant for 23-year-old Harshdeep Binner of Brampton, charged with the same crimes as Singh.
The second suspect was not at that location, so we continue to look for him, and we strongly encourage him to seek legal advice and to turn himself in.
News of Singh's arrest comes 2 months after police initially appealed for help identifying suspects captured on surveillance camera in the parking garage, where the alleged attack took place before Christmas. Ontario Provincial Police said this week the alleged abduction of Hajtamiri and the frying pan attack weeks earlier appear to be related. Hajtamiri's former boyfriend Mohammed Lilo was arrested 9 days after she disappeared. He is charged with criminal harassment. Investigators said Lilo has offered very little help to police. The OPP has not said whether more charges are imminent.
So as I followed this story, I thought once they get to any one of these people involved in the abduction or the frying pan attack, once one of them goes down and gets arrested, the house of cards is just going to fall in and they're going to start talking. In this case, they got one guy arrested, they have a warrant out for another, and they're looking for him. But I'm thinking when I remember when this news broke, I thought, in days we're going to know what happened. It wasn't necessarily the case, but it's a pretty significant development to get anyone associated with anything that's going on around Elnaz at this point.
Well, and it's like anyone that commits a crime such as this is a fool anyway. Mm-hmm. But it's 2023 and you're in Toronto. There are cameras everywhere. You can't do anything without being filmed. They've probably compiled enough footage to follow them exactly where they went, what happened. Mm-hmm. It was only a matter of time.
And then when it's as high profile as this is in the photos all over the news, someone is going to talk. And that's maybe what happened because they had their names and their photos and they got them. But the two involved in this case, it's Riyasat Singh and Harshdeep Binner, both had criminal records. I remember when they were when Singh was arrested and they were looking for Binner, I was doing some Google searching trying to find what I could about these guys. And what came up was a bunch of articles using both of their names related to arrests for an organized type vehicle theft ring. There was a whole bunch of, I think it was 40 certain models of trucks. I don't know if it was Ford F-150 or whatever.
I think it was.
Yeah. And these two were involved in an arrest related to a significant amount of vehicle thefts with the theory that the vehicles were being shipped out of the country. So when I happened upon that, I thought maybe these are just some kind of paid kind of criminal hitmen kind of people that you could, just pay to do anything. And I put this whole thing about the vehicle theft ring as an afterthought. I didn't consider its connection to Elnaz's case, but as we learn a bit more, that may be a part of this. I'll jump. Anything you want to say about it before I jump ahead to why I think the vehicle theft ring may be more significant than maybe it would have been seen on the surface?
Well, it's just, organized crime is just one big ring. Mm-hmm. and like birds of a feather. If they're doing one thing, they're probably not far off from getting involved in another.
Yeah, it's just, why would people involved in an organized vehicle theft ring in Western Canada be involved with attacking a young woman with a frying pan in Ontario? Is
money.
Yeah, I think money would do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump ahead again. We're going to look at coverage of a press conference that the police did on the 1-year anniversary of Elnaz's abduction. They gave some significant new information during this press conference that may start to tie this together. This is going to outline, among other things, it's going to outline the second arrest of Mohammed Lilo. So up until this point, we've heard that about 9 days after her abduction, he was arrested for criminal harassment. Just before the 1-year anniversary, he was again arrested, but now charged in connection to the attempted murder and attempted abduction of Elnaz from the underground parking lot. So of course, when they get Mr. Singh arrested, the person responsible, I can only assume he talked and gave enough information that they were able to tie Mohammed Lilo to that. So
he sung like a canary.
Hell yeah, that's how it seems. But but a lot more is going to come out during this press conference that, again, is going to connect some loose ends. Here it is.
I've been a police officer for just shy of 32 years. I have never been involved or am aware of a case similar to this.
Along with the never-before-released suspect sketches, the OPP and York Regional Police now offering a $100,000 reward for information that will help them learn what happened to Elnaz.
And the demons we have come face to face with during this investigation are hard to comprehend.
Lead investigator OPP Detective Inspector Martin Graham reading an emotional letter from Hajtamiri's mother Fariba, living in Iran, pleading for the public's help to bring her family closure.
We pray that you will do the right thing and help us out of this suffering and bring justice for Elnaz.
Arrested 6 months after her alleged abduction, Hajtamiri's former boyfriend Mohammed Lilo is charged with attempted murder and kidnapping.
We are aware that Lilo had a company that was involved in shipping containers.
Tonight, for the first time, police revealing Lilo ran a shipping container business that delivered all over the world. CTV News has confirmed the 2 other men charged by York Regional Police in the frying pan attack and alleged abduction attempt against Elnaz weeks before she went missing had been arrested by police in Edmonton in March, charged in the theft of about 40 Ford F-150 pickup trucks. One man, Harshdeep Binner, remains in custody. The second, Riasat Singh, pleaded guilty to aggravated assault and has since been deported. Hajtamiri had gone into hiding with family in Wasaga Beach following that December parking garage attack in Richmond Hill. 23 days later, she was gone.
That every resource that was available to us, she received, and the place of safety and where she was what we thought was suitable.
Elnaz hasn't been seen or heard from since.
A lot to say about that clip as well. But I want to start with, at the very end of the clip, you hear a police officer speaking on behalf of the police department saying, and I think the reporter kind of threw them under the bus a bit in the edit, but he says, like, we've done everything we could to get her somewhere where we thought she was going to be safe. And then as that clip ends, the reporter's like, and she hasn't been seen from since. But I think, like, it's obvious that she was being stalked and attacked and being tracked. You'd think the police would have been able to do more than get her an hour and a half out of the city to stay with family. It obviously didn't work.
Well, and also, Mohammed Lilo had been at the Wasaga Beach house.
Yeah, he knew that.
It's not like he was completely new to him or like had no idea about this family's beach house or whatever. Mm-hmm. He had been there. Mm-hmm. So if she wasn't staying at her apartment, it was only a process of elimination of where she was.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, we agree, and by the police's admissions during the different clips we've heard, they also agree that the attack in the underground parking lot in December and the abduction are one and the same. They're connected. If they have Mohammed Lilo arrested in connection to the underground parking attack for some involvement to the point that he's charged with attempted murder and attempted kidnapping, at this point, they know he did it. Whatever happened, they know he's involved.
Absolutely. Well, and so they mentioned that Mohammed Lilo owns this importing, exporting business, and I'm assuming that's the one she worked at.
It must have been.
It's probably how they met.
It's too much of a coincidence. I'm reading between the lines, but and also it explains the fellows that were arrested in that attack. If they were stealing 40 F-150 vehicles, they got to get them to wherever they're getting them. I'm sure Mohammed Lilo would be able to accommodate that.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm
they probably were parting them out. They probably weren't like shipping a full vehicle, but you never know.
Yeah.
Regardless, you're right. This is all coming together now.
Certainly. And also a scary thought is if he's sending container things all over the world, you'd think he'd also have an ability to get rid of a body.
Yeah.
Which is a dark thought.
Living or dead, he could make someone disappear.
Yeah. Scary person to end up on the bad side of. It seems like Elnaz, whether knowingly or unknowingly, ended up surrounded by people involved in organized crime. Is what seems like is happening.
Yeah, she met this guy. I guess she obviously kind of liked him. It didn't sound like she was like head over heels for this guy, just with how she kind of kept it under wraps. But I don't think she was involved in anything criminal, but she knew too much, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then when she was like, I'm not really into this, that really pissed him off for multiple reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And he either did mental gymnastics enough to be like, oh, well, she knows too much, she's seen too much, whatever. Or it was just jealousy and whatever.
Or maybe a mix of both. She knows too much and I'm a jealous psychopath who have access to these people who will do anything for a couple grand. And, the one guy, Mr. Singh, who is arrested for the underground attack with the frying pan, he pleads guilty for aggravated assault and just gets deported. So, like, the only punishment he gets, like that aggravated assault charge is nothing because he's deported. Really, his punishment is he's just told to leave Canada.
Yeah, I think that's the general rule. Like, lots of immigrant inmates will like continue to break the law in jail just so they can stay in the country. Because as soon as you're out, you're getting deported.
Yeah,
you can't stay.
Well, that's what
doesn't matter where you're from.
Mm-hmm. Well, the next development, and you see a pattern here. We're just kind of jumping from development to development, but the next one allows police to close in further on the people not involved in the underground parking lot attack, but the actual abduction. Police release photos that appear to be taken from a surveillance camera of a couple people just kind of lingering outside of a door of a building. You can't really tell what they're doing or where they are, but police have reason to believe that the people in these photos are involved in the abduction. So they don't give names or anything other than these photos, but it's obvious to the public and people following this story that they're closing in on those involved in the abduction. But a big update comes when one of them is arrested. Here's how that's shared with the public.
We would consider him to be certainly dangerous.
Police say this man, Deshaun Davis of Toronto, is one of 3 suspects investigators believe were involved in Elnaz Hajtamiri's abduction January 12, 2022, when loved ones say 3 men posing as police officers, claiming to have a warrant for Elnaz's arrest, forcibly dragged her barefoot through the snow from Wasaga Beach home into a white Lexus SUV. Elnaz hasn't been seen or heard from since.
An arrest warrant has been sworn to and is in existence, and we would encourage Mr. Davis, if he's watching, to turn himself in, and anybody who knows his whereabouts is encouraged to contact police immediately.
The warrant for Davis's arrest comes 3 weeks after police released these images of 3 people they consider to be suspects in the alleged kidnapping. Investigators believe Davis and another man and woman are all from the GTA.
We certainly do believe that we are closing in on determining exactly what happened to Elnaz and to hold those people responsible.
Police have also arrested and charged 2 more men, Harshpreet Sakone of Mono last month and Akash Rana of Delta, BC a week ago. Both are charged with aggravated assault and conspiracy to commit an indictable offense. Investigators are also looking for 2 men they're calling potential persons of interest relating to vehicle rentals in December of 2021. Hajtamiri's family, police say, remains grateful.
And are hopeful that the work that's being done will result in the answers that everybody is seeking.
Hoping to bring Elnaz home.
With the update, when it rains, it pours. A lot comes there as well. You hear a string of names. They arrest one person involved with the alleged, or one person thought to be involved with the abduction, but they also have people who are involved with simply renting cars, which makes sense that they would be doing this with rental cars. But if the police, and I love that cop with the British accent, if they're at the point that they're getting like the people renting the cars, releasing photos of these abductors, you know, from surveillance cameras or whatever, they got these guys.
Oh yeah, and one was from BC.
Yeah,
like that's a ways away from Ontario.
Delta, BC. Yeah, well, they didn't explain his role. They said he was charged with aggravated assault, so I don't know what his role even in it is, but they have a list of people, because we already know who's involved in the frying pan attack. One of the people involved in the abduction, then there was someone with an aggravated assault charge, and then two people that are persons of interest related to rental cars in December. So I can only assume that they are the people who probably supplied a rental car to go get her with the frying pan in her underground parking lot. But well, that just goes to show that they're only telling us what they want us to know. They know more. Oh, hell yeah.
They've got a ton of stuff.
They know exactly what happened at this point. And they probably did not long after arresting the first guy in the frying pan attack. And they say, you know, if you don't tell us exactly what happened, you're gone out of Canada. He told them.
Oh, yeah.
And then they're like, you're still deported.
You're still gone. But thanks for the info.
Yeah. But it's, you know, when you get these low level scumbags who are willing to do this horrible stuff for a couple grand, they're only as loyal as their financials allow or as their health and safety allows. So he's thinking like,
absolutely,
you know, when the cops start asking tough questions, he's thinking like, will you give me money? And are the other people going to kill me if I talk to you? That's all he cares about.
Yeah, these people aren't geniuses by any means.
No.
So,
but up until this point, her ex-boyfriend, Mohammed Lilo, who I think we all agree is involved in this in a ringleader type way, he's being held in prison. He is not talking to the public, or he is not talking to anybody. He's not cooperating with the investigation. He has a lawyer who... Yeah, he is shocker there. He also has a lawyer who's quite the hard nose. There's a couple clips of his lawyer talking to the press who is... doesn't come across great. The lawyer is absolutely like, he's innocent. We're going to get him out. This, you know, I'm going to prove it.
Like, I get it's your job to say that.
I know. I just hate to hear
it. Like, come on, buddy.
You want to hear the big update? And this update is why I decided to pull this episode, these old topics from my prior episodes, and put it all in one episode here tonight. Is there was a significant update in this case just a week and a half ago. I'm going to play it, and this will be no surprise to you or anybody else who's listening up to this point.
Today, the Crown Attorney has charged Mohammed Lilo by way of a direct indictment for the murder of Elnaz Hajtamiri.
For 666 days, Elnaz Hajtamiri has been missing. Now her former boyfriend and the man police believe orchestrated her abduction, Mohammed Lilo, learned he's going to trial accused of first-degree murder. Lilo learned of the new charge from jail in Penetanguishene, where he's been locked up since July of last year. Lilo was arrested in Quebec and initially charged with attempted murder and kidnapping in Hajtamiri's disappearance from a home in Wasaga Beach, January 12, 2022.
Her whereabouts remains unknown. We continue to strive to identify the persons who are responsible for her abduction and hold them accountable, and to bring the answers to the family that they're seeking.
Police have either arrested or issued warrants for a total of 11 suspects, with Lilo believed to be the common thread among them. Police say Hajtamiri had broken up with Lilo months prior to her disappearance. Lilo ran a shipping container business and worked with Hajtamiri until the breakup. He was charged with criminal harassment 9 days after Elnaz went missing. A direct indictment from the Crown now means Lilo will go directly to trial. Previously scheduled preliminary hearing dates have been canceled, as the 36-year-old Lilo now prepares to face the first-degree murder charge in the disappearance and presumed death of Elnaz Hajtamiri. Lilo's lawyer, David O'Connor, says his client is innocent.
The disclosure we have doesn't disclose a case against my client, and I don't expect they ever will be able to. He's innocent, and it's unfortunate it's going to take this amount of time in order to show his innocence.
Mohammed Lila will now make his first appearance in Superior Court next month. The allegations against him have not been tested in court.
More questions answered. For one, we know from that clip that she did work with him up until their breakup, but no surprise that he's arrested. The surprise for me is that 11 other people are involved.
There's questions are answered, but more questions open up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know there are a few no body cases, but I would love to know what they have to solidly charge him with first degree murder,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like so rarely happens.
Yeah, they must have a rock solid case, but so many other people associated with it are arrested. If a couple of them have said, this is what we did or he had someone do, maybe that's enough. He certainly has the means to make it happen. If he has people beating her with frying pans, dressing up as cops, pulling her out of houses, sending...
Well, and when you have that many people involved, yeah, it's not going to work out well for you.
Of course,
especially
he
when
got
you're
caught
in the middle of the Venn diagram.
Yeah.
Like,
and not only that, you're her ex-boyfriend who has been stalking or harassing her. Apparently it's there was a lot of like emails sent to her from him. He showed up at her house. Like, did he think he was going to get away with this?
Oh, the digital footprint is probably massive between emails and like texts between these people, even on burner phones.
Yeah.
Like they've probably collected so much of that. And yeah, even with a no body case, if they can get enough physical evidence, like maybe there was a bunch of blood somewhere, we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But like a first degree murder charge is pretty crazy. Also, he was in Penetanguishene.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not like a maximum security mental institution?
I think it used to be.
Oh, okay.
I think it's just a prison now. That was the prison they were treating like psychopaths with LSD and stuff back in like the 60s and 70s. Now I think it's just your run of the mill, like you're locked up playing video games with other criminals.
Oh, okay. So
but
what are they leaving out of this?
For the charge to be laid after all this time, I guess what they probably, before they were going to pursue a first degree murder conviction and a no body case, they were probably making sure they had everybody else, all the ducks in a row. And it seems like they did it. They have, a lineup of people involved in every aspect of this. So maybe that they needed that solid of a case. But imagine being her family, holding out hope until this point that she's going to be found, and then they lay a first degree murder like charge. Would that, in a way, it would take the wind out of your sails, but then also justice is there. Like that must be a very conflicted feeling.
Oh, I couldn't imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Just not how quickly the thread unraveled, but it's like I said, when you have that many people involved, the domino effect is just. Oof. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, let me ask you this though. Given all the elements of this case and the facts of the case that we discussed, do you think there is any chance she could be alive somewhere? Like, well, I hazard to think of a reason why they would have kept her alive
and successfully
for 2 years.
Like I said, they're not very smart.
Mm-hmm.
And what would have been happening to her these last 2 years?
Mm-hmm.
That's an even more terrifying thought. If she is alive, I would be unbelievably surprised.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what ever happened, but I'm sure she's no longer with us.
Because this is a crime that, although it happens in Ontario and in Canada, it has tentacles that go around the world due to his shipping and receiving business.
Yes.
And many of the people involved in this are immigrants to Canada, so they would have connections out of the country. So I guess there is the possibility that she could be held somewhere outside of the country. But what would be the point? Like, it seems to me that this is most likely a jealous man scorned, who maybe feels he was wronged in some way. She owes me money, or she knows too much, or she did this horrible thing to me and I'm going to get her. why would that lead to, so I'm going to have her held for 2 years in another country against her will? I think most likely whatever happened probably happened the night that she was taken.
Most likely. Yeah, it's wild to well, stranger things have happened too. It's wild to think
That's true.
of the possibilities. But especially because police don't lay down first-degree murder charges all willy-nilly.
No. It would take
in fact, they usually try not to.
Yeah. It would take a significant development and a strong piece of evidence to get the ability to lay that charge. They're not just going to do a Hail Mary. It doesn't work like that.
They're just going to be like, this is like probably what happened.
I'm sure he did it. Let's just charge him.
They could do that for a lot of cases.
Yeah.
But
I have one other story or part of the story to bounce back to that. It wasn't like as high profile of a development as some of the others that we went through, but it does paint a picture of Mohammed Lilo and what he was up to. I don't know if you read the article or came across the article where a private investigator that was working for Mohammed Lilo spoke to CBC News about what he was doing for Mohammed. And what he was actually doing was surveilling Elnaz. So not only did she have these things under her car monitoring her, tracking her, there was also private investigators following her. I'm going to read you just portions of the CBC article, and this will give a sense of what Lilo is up to. So, and this article came out not long after her disappearance, long before he was arrested for being involved. So here's what it says. The former boyfriend of Elnaz Hajtamiri hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her location in the days and weeks before she was abducted from Wasaga Beach on January 12th. Mohammed Lilo enlisted the services of Brampton-based Investigations Plus Limited to locate and surveil Hajtamiri, three sources with direct knowledge of the situation told CBC News. One of the sources said investigators with the firm conducted surveillance on January 10th and 11th outside the Wasaga Beach home where Hajtamiri was staying. An investigator, however, was called off on the morning of January 12th. The same day, three men dressed in police gear forced their way into the house and abducted the 37-year-old Iranian immigrant. Gabriel Kujakori, owner of Investigations Plus Limited, confirmed to CBC News in a television interview that Lilo hired his firm sometime around December 6th or 9th, asking him to find Hajtamiri and watch her movements. Koja Kari said Lilo provided the addresses of her Richmond Hill condo building and the Wasaga Beach home. When asked about the fact that no one was watching the home at the time of the abduction, the owner of the private investigator firm said it was just a coincidence. He said no one had specifically asked him to remove surveillance. When Lilo first contacted Investigations Plus in early December, the owner said he claimed to be Hajtamiri's ex-boyfriend and said he was a lawyer from Montreal and gave the name Nazar, although the owner of the private investigation company said he learned Lilo's real name after doing his own research, which I'm just going to pull away from it. By him doing his own research would tell me something was up. He's a private investigator. He's like, this isn't adding up. I'm going to look into this guy. Okay, he's lying. But I'm going to go on. Koja Kuri, the owner of the firm, said Lilo initially claimed that Hajtamiri had stolen $100,000 from him, and he wanted to find her so he could serve her with court papers. But later on, Lilo's stories changed, the owner said. He claimed that his brother had been shot. At that time, Lilo intimated that Hajtamiri was involved in the shooting and that she was dangerous. Koja Kuri said his job was to keep an eye on her and let Mohammed Lilo know if she was traveling towards Montreal so he could call the police. Now they're quoting the owner of the business. He sounded over the phone like he was worried about his safety and stuff like that. I actually didn't suspect anything. And now they're just describing, because to me, when I hear this, the idea of hiring a private investigator to follow an ex-girlfriend just seems like it should be illegal. Here's what they say about it in this article. It's legal in Ontario for a licensed private investigator to conduct surveillance on an individual within a public setting at any time of day or night, including gathering photos or footage of a person without their consent. But the surveillance must be conducted from public property or from private property where the public has implied access, such as a shopping mall or grocery store, and investigators can't violate any municipal, provincial, or federal laws. So it is, in fact, legal. But that article, I don't know why, to me, that part of it is one of the most disturbing of all of it, because he hires the private investigator a couple weeks before she's attacked
and
in
then
the parking lot.
The day she is abducted, coincidentally, the surveillance was called off.
Yeah, but the owner of the business says it was a coincidence. That's a pretty big coincidence.
There are big coincidences and small coincidences.
Yeah.
And that's a big coincidence.
It is. But maybe I would love to know if Mohammed Lilo knew that the surveillance would be called off or was called off for some reason.
Well, I have a feeling that this guy, as nice as he was to talk to not only police but media, I have a feeling he's somehow intertwined. One of the attackers, I think, the frying pan attackers, he was from Brampton. So I wonder if they're buddies or just know each other through grapevine or whatever. Lots of people insert themselves into investigations to try and make themselves.
That's true.
Look, I had nothing to do with this. And maybe he didn't, other than, the surveillance thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I have this inkling that he does know more than he leads on. Maybe. I don't know.
It just, in the context of it all, it seems weird. And just
he made sure to outline that everything we did was within the law, though.
Mm-hmm.
Right here, public areas or semi-private.
But if we're pointing fingers at people, I'm suspicious a bit of him. But I'm also she's attacked with a frying pan, almost beaten to death in the parking lot. They find tracking devices. She goes to the police. Why aren't they able to protect her? What could she have done to prevent this from happening? Because it seems like nothing.
Yeah, that's a really good question. What more could they have done? They could have said, maybe pick a location where he's never been or doesn't know of, but I guess you only know so many people.
Yeah, but could they not get her? But I don't know. I was just about to say, could they not just get her an apartment somewhere? But there's probably so many, and this is dark to say, but there's probably so many people that could use an apartment to get away from somebody, and they don't get it. There's, you go to a women's shelter.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe that was her choice. Should I go to a women's shelter or should I go with family? She's an Iranian immigrant, to go in a women's shelter. She had her back against the wall.
And hindsight's always 20/20. The police, I hope, knew this was a serious thing. It sounds like she knew how serious this was, but maybe neither of them, the police nor the victim, thought it would ever come to this. Maybe she thought the Wasaga Beach house was good enough.
Yeah, I don't know. I think the attempted abduction and beating in the underground parking lot, to me, would, mixed with the tracking devices being found, him showing up at her house weeks earlier. We don't know what emails or texts or whatever she was receiving. I have a feeling when she was being dragged away from that house in Wasaga Beach, she knew exactly what was happening. And in the days leading up to it,
she knew the people doing it.
She certainly knew who they were working for. And in the days leading up to it, I bet you every sound that she heard outside that house, she's probably like, it's coming.
I couldn't imagine. Maybe what the police could have done at the very least was police surveillance.
Mm-hmm.
Have a cruiser sitting outside her house for, 12 hours each day or whatever.
She must have been horrified. And the idea of being, when you hear of a crime and it's this sudden thing that happens, this unprovoked incident, you're pushed in front of a train, or, there's a robbery gone wrong and you get killed. It's awful and horrific. But this story, it strikes me different because it's like she's being hunted and stalked, and she tries to get away and she can't.
Well, and she knew. She was weary of the paramedics with the ambulance. She didn't want to go with them.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the cops with sneakers showed up, she was like, "Oh God,
here we go." Yeah,
this is
So we're not very far away from her trial, from Mohammed Lilo's trial. I'm sure he will. Well, he's already maintained his innocence. We're going to learn what evidence they have against him, and I'm sure we'll talk about this case in the future, because it's I'm fascinated to find out what everybody has to say, because we really, from our point of view, are just getting the play-by-play of the arrests and the charges, But to know what they actually said and, and who's pointing
Yeah.
fingers at whom is going to be fascinating.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it's going to come down to like a kind of like a hiring a hitman sort of situation. I just hope the evidence is rock solid. And it seems like at this point, they're going to have a strong case because they have that many people. Once there's this saying, you want to keep a secret. If two people can only keep a secret if one of them are dead, I think
That's right.
11 people can't keep a secret.
Yeah. If you want to do something like this, you can't have that many people involved.
Yeah, imagine
just
the other stuff they've done. You can't just jump in and do this. This is a big group of bad people.
Oh, and it ripples, and a lot of people from a lot of places know that these are bad people, and they're going to hear of this and be like, "Oh, yeah, that sounds."
Oh, that's what they're up to.
That's pretty on brand. Yeah.
A dark story. I look forward to the trial, and I just hope the outcome is something that gives Elnaz's family some peace, because they've been in the news a lot. Like her mom, bless her heart, just seems defeated, and I believe her uncle is kind of like serving as the family spokesperson, and again just seems like a great guy. Her family is behind a hashtag bring Elnaz home, and
isn't her mom still in Iran?
Yeah.
This situation is just awful and horrific to begin with. Imagine being that far away and just all you can do is wait by the phone.
Yeah. So horrible.
Yeah. Ugh.
As it gets worse and worse, the abduction, initially, of course, you would have some hope that she's going to be found. As that stretches on and people are being arrested, and then you start hearing words like attempted murder and then murder. Yeah. And again, a lot of her family is probably watching it play out in a legal system they're unfamiliar with.
And yeah, they probably feel so powerless and helpless.
Awful story.
It's just a waiting game.
Well, we will have an update to this story in the future. When the trial happens, we will both follow it closely, and we'll certainly do
do we have a date?
We don't at this point.
The trial? Okay.
No. I believe 2024 is when it's expected to start.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. I think nothing is going to bring her back. Of course, I just I wish it was a situation where he was caught red-handed and he's forced to reveal what actually happened. Although I think even if he doesn't, other people associated probably will.
Oh, it'll come out.
Yeah.
It might take a while, but like you said, two people can keep a secret if one's dead.
Not 11.
So, yeah. No.
When they're all
11 people trying to save their own ass.
Yeah, certainly.
No.
All right. Well, Madeleine, this was a dark topic to spend the night discussing. So it's time to wrap this up. But usually I say, what's coming next? I should say, when do you think we should hear from you again? Because you got a lot coming up.
I think we should tentatively plan for next week, because we never know what'll happen. Okay. I was telling you, I've been this whole pregnancy, I've been so scared of being early, and watch me go overdue.
Okay.
So yeah.
All right.
We've got 12 days till my due date, and just because I've been so worried about being early, I bet she'll be, if she's anything like me, she'll be a dawdler and show up late or right on time.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Well, we're all so excited for you. So we'll see if you're here next week. If not, we'll know you're somewhere amazing, doing amazing stuff that we're excited to hear about.
Well, thank you. I'll keep you updated.
And I'll keep everyone else updated. I want to thank you for joining Madeleine and I for this episode. Now, as I mentioned during the discussion, our thoughts and best wishes are for Elnaz's loved ones on what will surely be a very difficult and a very disturbing trial. I plan to release a follow-up episode at the point the trial reaches a conclusion, but again, no matter what the result, this is a horrific and tragic tale, and a great reminder for all of us to trust our instincts and take no chances with people who prove themselves to be dangerous and unpredictable. And with that all said, I'm going to wrap up this episode, but before I do, let me end here with some thanks. First, a big thanks to Madeleine Klein for sharing another evening with me and with you, the listeners of Nighttime. I'd like to thank LJ from the Dystopian Simulation podcast, who provides the intro and outro voiceovers, and Monty Data, who provides the music for this series. And then lastly, but most importantly, I have a massive thank you to each and every one of you listening to Nighttime, as without your interest and your support, this show would be as pointless as it would be impossible. Now on the topic of support, let me thank the newest subscribers to the premium feed. Tom, Tim, and Keegan, thank you for your generous support. And for anyone else who'd like to support the show, you can help us out here in a variety of ways. First of all, a premium feed subscription costs just a couple dollars a month, and that money funds the creation of the show. But a premium feed subscription will also give you the episodes 2 days early, it'll give them to you ad-free, and it'll give you access to a full back catalog of Nighttime episodes. If that sounds like something you're interested in, you can go premium right now at patreon.com/nighttimepodcast. And even if you don't want to go premium, you can still help the show grow by simply sharing this episode on social media and letting all your like-minded friends know that they should listen. Your support in that is very much appreciated. If anyone has any thoughts, opinions, or feedback on this episode or this case, the best way to contact the show is via a voice memo sent at nighttimepodcast.com/contact. Now until next time, I want to remind you to take care of each other, hug your loved ones tight, and let us know if you see anything weird.
The Nighttime Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Jordan Bonaparte.